Hey everyone, this is Dave Dubeau with another episode of the Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. Today, zooming in from Orlando, we've got Mr. Austin Hare. How are you doing today, Austin?
Doing well. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. So Austin is a very accomplished real estate entrepreneur. He's a podcaster. He's been involved in all sorts of different kinds of real estate investing. And these days, he's into a very, very interesting niche, and that is working with health professionals and helping them to get into their own commercial space. So, Austin, tell me a little bit, how did you get into that specific niche? Because it is pretty specific, and what have you found to be the big benefits of focusing on that?
Yeah. So you're right. It is super specific, super niche. But the way that I got into it was that I was a fitness entrepreneur. So I had a couple gyms that I owned, little fitness centers around Orlando, and I had 3 locations. I was looking to expand to several more, and I was using someone to help me go and look for locations. And it's my now current partner, but at the time, when I was working with them, they really liked the way that they broke down all the data. It was very analytical. It was everything from obvious things like, density and income and population density, all that kind of stuff. But then a lot of things that I never really thought about before, like your number of competitors per population and combining those with the Google reviews. And then how close are you from synergistic users or anchor centers or whatever. And so what we did was we put all those out on a graph. We plotted them and gave them different rankings and different scores for each of those different rankings. And then it made the data very clear. And so I was like, wow, it was interesting, looking at it through that perspective. I had really good clarity into where I wanted to go, and locations that I had felt good about ended up looking not so good. Locations that I didn't have any emotional feeling about ended up looking a lot better. And so thankfully I was able to sell the gyms in 2019 before COVID. That was very lucky.
Wow, yeah, that's sure.
Yeah. And then, I had always been, not always been, but I had been investing for a while in commercial real estate as a limited partner. And I had also bought some residential properties along the way, and I had converted those into Airbnbs. And so I had an interest in real estate. I had some experience in that sense, but that's when I really started working from the general partner side of things. And so his specialty for 14 years now, my partner and the rest of the guys that we work with have been doing retail healthcare. And so, the premise is, the theme is that they're an underserved kind of niche. And when you look at, you go back historically, the mom and pop foods, the fast food chains, back in the 50s and 60s, they were popping up everywhere. And it was the ones who really started taking good real estate on hard street corners, great visibility and great drive-by traffic and good locations. They started to really do well, and they started to get it consolidated. And then now look how big that industry is, right? And then you have the the pharmaceuticals like Eckerd's and Walgreens, CVS, those guys start to take it. And then in the 70s and 80s, or really, it was kind of like the 90s and 2000s, you kind of saw it with the banks. Urgent cares were kind of around that same time. And then now we do a lot with dental, which has been a lot later. And you see dental taking these big prominent corners. And so really what we try and do is just help give data to the feeling and help people who are in healthcare in any capacity. And we don't do just healthcare. I mean, we've done entertainment. We're working with banks right now too. But it's like putting numbers behind the feeling to help them really get the best spot that's going to help them in their business, because you might end up paying a little bit more in rent for these high places, but what's going to happen is you're going to pay less in your digital marketing dollars, right? And a lot of times people don't think about it in those terms. So, and then of course, there's the investing side of it, which is where we buy the buildings on behalf of tenants, and we invest in them, and we'll make money on the upside from the opportunity. So
yeah, that's huge. And I never really thought about it that way. So you guys have taken a very, very scientific approach to the whole location thing with real estate investing. And what you're using it, what you're showing your clients is that location is, in a certain way, part of their marketing budget. They might be paying more to be in that location, but their traffic is going to be so much greater.
Exactly. Yeah. So, there's a story of a guy that we helped. He was paying around $3,000 a month in rent, and his business wasn't doing good. We relocated him not very far, the other side of the freeway. He was in Georgia, and into a more prominent center. His rent went from $3,000 to $10,000. So, from a percentage wise, you're tripling, and it's very scary. But he doubled his business. He doubled his practice revenue, right? And so as a percentage, that rent factor still was relatively small in terms of his overall expenses, but he doubled his entire income. And so it's like looking at it in those types of terms, and getting past the emotion to really like help them find the best location.
Well, I guess we'd have to see what his original income was in comparison.
That's true.
Because if he went from $6,000 to $12,000, which I obviously did, but yeah, but it definitely makes a big difference. Yeah, that I would imagine. So what kind of, was he a dentist or what was he?
He was a family practice.
Family practitioner. Yeah. So we're talking millions of dollars a year in revenues. And that makes a big difference.
Exactly.
Yeah. Then the whole thing.
Exactly. So he was below $1 million in revenue before, and then I believe he bumped up to above $1 million after. So I mean, significant numbers. But and then the other thing too is sometimes when groups are growing, they like, if whether it's urgent care or dental or whatever, a lot of times they have strict directions to buy the businesses. And so what happens is you might come to a place, like if a dental group wants to acquire an individual practice, the practice might be owned, like both the practice and the real estate might be owned by the doctor.
Right.
And they might want to sell that real estate as part of the transaction. And the group physically can't buy it, right? They have the directive of what to do with the money. Maybe it's private equity, maybe it's family office, whatever that money is. They have specific, metrics for that. And so they physically can't buy the real estate. So we'll come in and we'll buy the real estate on their behalf in order to help them, facilitate that transaction as well. And for the investors that are involved, and that's where we take investment, for the investors that are involved in that, then the upside is significant as well.
Yeah. So walk us through how that might work, because that from the investor's standpoint. So in this case, you and your investors would go in and you buy the property, your client would buy the business, you and your investors would in essence become the landlords. How are you able in that case to kind of bump up the value of the asset, or are you just kind of buying it?
No, we are. Great question. So, in commercial real estate, it's very different than residential real estate, which is based strictly on the location. Commercial real estate is based on the cash flow and it's based on the strength of the tenant. So what that means is you could have a tenant paying $100,000 a year in rent, but if that's a mom and pop, like I was a great example when I owned the gyms, right? Like I was a mom and pop, like fitness store owner. Like I was not commanding a good price for that building. Like I wasn't providing, I was like, I would you consider high risk. So my $100,000 in rent that I would pay might make the building worth $1 million if you're factoring that at a 10%, cap rate, a 10% rate of capitalization. So if somebody like a large dental group in this example were to come in and take over that same space, pay that same $100,000, well, that's a lot safer bet, right? The risk is much lower. Investors pay more for that. Now you would lower that cap rate, could potentially go from a 10% cap rate to a 5% cap rate. And so you're doubling the value of the building. Now you're looking at a $2 million value. And so it's the same thing when you have an individual practice who's selling their real estate. A lot of times it's valued based on the lease that they've signed as an individual operator, which is going to be like an 8.5% cap rate or so. And when a big, much bigger institutional player comes in, if they've got dozens of locations, then that cap rate is going to be much smaller. So you could go from a 8.5 to 9% cap rate down to a 6.5 or a 6% cap rate, which, we did the math just a moment ago. You can start to see how much that really increases it. And so what we do is we buy from the individual dentist, right, at the value based on him leasing it. And then we get the lease signed from the organization in order to increase the value of that building. And so significant money can be made on the upside. And that's where investors can be taking that as well.
That's a fascinating idea. Hold that thought for a second. Hi there, this is Dave Dubeau, and real estate investors hire me to raise capital the right way. Why? Because most of them are stuck with too small of a portfolio and they don't know how to attract investors and raise money for their deals. So I help them to connect, capture, and close their ideal money partners. Bottom line, when you've got a deal, you're going to have the capital to do it. So go ahead and book a no-cost capital clarity session with me at bookachatwithdave.com. Again, that's bookachatwithdave.com.
I had no clue. That is fascinating. That really is.
It is crazy. Yeah, it is crazy, and it's just, unless you really get into that world, you just don't know. You just don't understand, kind of like the nuances of what investors are looking for in terms of real estate, commercial real estate, and the tenants.
Well, it's fascinating because it's forced appreciation, not based on anything you've done to the property itself. It's completely
Right.
based on the new tenant and the risk level of that tenant as a long-term tenant in that property. Yeah, that's fascinating. Very, very cool stuff. So how did you kind of, I mean, it sounds like you're a pretty analytical kind of guy. You were dabbling in real estate. You were doing the whole fitness thing. How did that light bulb just kind of, I mean, you went through this with these guys to help you find new locations. What was like the eureka moment for you, or when the angel sang and said, "Hey, this I'm getting out of the fitness biz. I'm getting into this."
Yeah, a couple things. My partner, he and I kind of, like I told you earlier, that he was helping me out find locations and stuff like that. But to go into more depth on that story, he invited me out to like a Tony Robbins event, and I decided to go, and we just got along really well. We were both kind of into that, self improvement, if you will, or like that self education type thing.
Yeah.
And we clicked a lot. And so it was during actually Tony Robbins event that he really realized, like, hey, as the broker, we're the ones who are identifying all this valuable real estate and all these valuable locations. And he was seeing guys go out and execute the strategy where it's like, you're bringing the value and then landlord is kind of reaping the benefit. So why don't we just partake on both sides? Now, of course, it's a really easy, when I say it like that, it all sounds like, oh yeah, that's a no-brainer, blah, blah, blah. But it's much easier said than done, because really to find the Rolodex of tenants to be able to represent, that's where it really takes a lot of time. And that's where I started getting involved, is bringing in new clients to do business for, because you're at the whim of the tenant. You have to prove yourself with them. You have to have experience. You have to get them to trust you. And so, and it's like, and they're not, accredited tenants are not a dime a dozen, right? It's not that difficult to find someone who's got like one location or two locations or even 4 or 5 locations, but they're not, until you really start getting into that 10 million in EBITDA, annual EBITDA and above, you're really not going to start to see cap rate compression. So there's just a lot of guys, like most people who are doing commercial real estate and are looking to rent spaces, by far, most of them are not going to be what you consider accredited. And so
they'll take anybody, right? Yeah. Okay. But yeah, no, that's fascinating. Like the way you guys have dialed that in. So what would you say now? So you've been doing this for a couple of years, and primarily before the business was a brokerage, right? A commercial brokerage looking to find tenants good spots. What percentage has the business switched from that to you guys actually bringing on investors and buying properties? What's your best guess on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're still mostly doing a lot of brokerage, because you just simply can't develop everything, right? And so we do love the development, like that's our focal point, but there's too many opportunities to just pass up on. So we still love brokers. We still do a lot of that. And so, I would say it's still probably most of our time is still spent on the brokerage side, but it's definitely shifting more and more towards the development side as we, acquire more properties and as we grow and stuff like that.
Very cool. Now, just out of personal curiosity, Austin, what have you done to find these A+ type tenants? These, what did you call them? Accredited tenants?
Yeah, accredited tenants.
I love it. So what's working well for you for finding these kind of tenants? Because they sound like the dream folks.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Historically, it's always been through live events. And so last year, those were all shut down, and we weren't able to do any live events. So it's really
time out for a second. Live events, what the heck would you call that kind of event, and how would
a dental event, like an urgent care event, like not a real estate specific event, but just like something where people go and meet up and you have vendors and booths and stuff. And
like trade show type things.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, so those have been largely shut down, and so we've just been trying to be smart about how we build relationships. We've been trying to network with them on LinkedIn. We've been trying to use our friends. We've been trying to have them on as guests on the podcast and have conversations and be intentional about it. And mailing them packages in the mail and stuff like that. And so really anything and everything to build a relationship. And it's not, we're trying not to be transactional about it. We're trying to really get to know these people and develop friendships as well. But,
because I would imagine your ideal clientele, like you say, they're not 1 or 2 locations. They've got locations everywhere. You do a good job for them. You get your foot in the door. Theoretically, the next time they need to expand, who are they going to talk to?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So if you do a good job with them on that, you build a good relationship with them on the first one. I mean, you're going to be working with these guys a lot, a lot. Some of them are growing 5, 10, 15 locations a year. I mean, that's, it's a lot of conversations that need to be had.
Now it sounds, you're based in Orlando, but you're telling us about a client that's in Georgia. So you guys kind of national, or are you all over the place? How do you
We're all over the place. I just got back from Texas. We flew out there a couple of times to do some site scouting with the client. And then, we purchased a building out in Lee Summit, Missouri. We're about to purchase one in Alabama. And so, we just do it all over the place.
Yeah. So you must have to find local commercial agents, boots on the ground kind of people to partner up with in those locations, or?
Kind of. I mean, we don't have to, we do have our own network partners to, facilitate that we can get paid, because it's just one of those things in commercial real estate. You just have to have, local partners everywhere. But
sign off on something basically.
But we, really don't. The thing about using a local broker is it can work well, or it can kind of backfire. There's like 3 things really that we do like a little bit differently. And so one thing is that we're not location bound. And what that means is sometimes the local broker can have location bias and simply put, he's been there his whole life, or he's been there a long time. He feels like he knows the area very well.
Yeah.
And he may not think that he needs to go drive the area, right? Or like physically look at it. And problem is, like, things change all the time. Some things come up available. Not everything hits CoStar or whatever program you're using to look at stuff. Mm-hmm. And so you physically have to go there and drive it. And so it's like, it would take me a long time to learn all of Dallas. Like, that's a massive area that's got 14 to 18 different trade areas. But I can learn the trade area that our client wants to go to within a day. You know what I mean? Driving it.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're not, like, we like to say, we're not location bound. We're not lazy, because while we're out there, we're going to be doing the due diligence. We're going to be driving around, and then we like to utilize technology. So a lot of brokers may not be as good as utilizing technology that's available today. We're not super young. We're in our early 30s, but we're a little bit younger than the average commercial real estate guy. And so will cross-reference Google Maps with CoStar, with a local property appraiser, to uncover every stone and find out, like, even if there's a building that we go when we drive by, it's not listed anywhere, it's not for sale. Well, can we, find out who the owner is and give them a call and see if we can make that happen?
Yeah, because if you figure out that that's the perfect location for your client,
right?
That's smart, really, really smart. Yeah, I love how you guys are using the technology. Now, as we're kind of wrapping this up, Austin, because time flies when we're having fun. Tell me a little bit about your podcast, and also how you mentioned it earlier, how you're using this as a way to kind of get to know some of your ideal clientele, because I think that's really, really smart. So if you're okay to it about it, tell us a little bit about your podcast and how you've used podcasting as a marketing tool.
Yeah. We want the podcast to be mutually beneficial. And so we also will use it as a way to build relationships and network with other people. And so what that means is if there's a client, somebody who we think would be an ideal client for us, we would invite them to come on to the show and figure out ways where they're also going to be benefiting from doing an interview. And so if that's somebody who's acquiring dental practices, then, we can talk to them about what makes their business unique, right? Like, why would a doctor want to sell to them? If we're talking, it really, anybody who has a business, like, what is their unique selling point? What is their niche? Like, because obviously they got something, like, they've been doing something right if they pop up on our radar. So it's not like they're just a random person. And then making sure that we're generous with the content, that, like, we like to share the raw files, we like to share the links and stuff like that, and just helping them promote their business through the podcast, and just creating these situations where everybody's benefiting from the time that they're investing into the show.
Smart. Really, really smart. So, Austin, this has been a fun interview. I really appreciate it. Obviously, I enjoy all of my interviews, but this one was cool because I learned something quite new that I wasn't aware of before. So I appreciate that very much. If people want to find out more about you and what you're up to in the podcast, what should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. Just, go onto our website. It's just Leaders RE. That's like RE is in real estate. So leadersre.com. You can check us out there. If you have questions or interested in learning more about our investing in the dental practices, or, my email address is just Ahair, it's first initial last name, Ahair@leadersre.com as well. And yeah, we're happy to help and provide value where we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. All right, everybody, take care, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Well, hey there. Thanks for tuning into the Property Profits Podcast. If you like this episode, that's great. Please go ahead and subscribe on iTunes. Give us a good review. That'd be awesome. I appreciate that. And if you're looking to attract investors and raise capital for your deals, then I'm going to invite you to get a complimentary copy of my newest book, right back there. There it is. The Money Partner Formula. You can get a PDF version at investorattractionbook.com. Again, investorattractionbook.com. Take care.